So here's what I want you to do. If you've ever felt like you're chasing someone who keeps running, if you've ever felt like you're giving everything and getting almost nothing back, if you've ever wondered why the moment you pull back, they suddenly come toward you, I want you to comment the word close down below. Just the word close, because that tells me this is exactly where you are right now. And I want to know I'm speaking to the right person. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now, because what I'm about to share with you is the kind of stuff that changes how you see relationships forever. All right, let's get into it. Let's start at the very beginning, because before you can understand how to get close to an avoidant partner, you need to understand what avoidant actually means. Not the clinical definition, not the textbook version, the real lived human version of what's actually going on inside them. An avoidant person is not someone who doesn't want love. Let me say that again because I need you to hear it. An avoidant person is not someone who doesn't want love. They want love just as much as you do, maybe more. But somewhere along the way, usually in childhood, they learned something. They learned that needing people is dangerous. They learned that depending on someone means getting hurt. They learned that closeness equals loss of freedom, loss of self, loss of safety. And so they built walls, not to keep you out specifically, but to keep pain out in general. You just happen to be on the other side of the wall. Now, here's where most people get it wrong. They see the wall and they think the solution is to break through it, to push harder, to show more love, to demonstrate how much they care, to be so present, so available, so consistent that the avoidant person has no choice but to feel safe. But that's not how it works. And I'm going to explain why. When you push toward an avoidant person, when you increase your emotional intensity, when you start wanting more reassurance, more communication, more closeness than they're currently offering, you trigger something in them. It's almost like an alarm goes off. And that alarm says danger, too close, losing independence, losing self. And they pull back, not because they don't like you, but because their nervous system is telling them to run. It's a survival response. It's not personal, but it feels incredibly personal when you're on the receiving end of it. So what do? You do something that feels completely counterintuitive. You stop chasing. But here's the critical part. You don't stop caring. You don't become cold. You don't play games. You don't pretend to be unavailable. You do something much more sophisticated than that. You become genuinely secure in yourself. And that right there is the single most attractive thing you can be to an avoidant person. Let me explain what I mean by that. A secure person doesn't need constant reassurance. A secure person can handle silence without spiraling. A secure person brings their own warmth to the relationship without demanding it back at the same intensity. A secure person can say, I like spending time with you, and genuinely mean it, without it being a veiled demand for more. That kind of energy is magnetic to an avoidant person, because it doesn't trigger the alarm. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like freedom with connection. And that's exactly what an avoidant person is searching for. They want to love you without feeling like they're going to lose themselves. Show them that's possible, and everything changes. Now let's talk about something really specific, because I know some of you are reading this and thinking, okay, but what does that actually look like in real life? What do I actually say? What do I actually do differently tomorrow morning? And I love that question, because this is where theory meets reality. Here's the first thing. Stop making every interaction feel like a test. Avoidant people are incredibly sensitive to pressure, even subtle pressure, even the kind of pressure that comes packaged in perfectly reasonable questions. Questions like, where do you see this going? Or, do you love me? Or, why don't you ever want to talk about us? These questions aren't wrong. They're natural. They come from a real place of wanting to understand what you have together. But when asked with the wrong energy, when asked with a hint of anxiety underneath them, they land like a quiz the avoidant person didn't sign up to take. And what happens when people feel quizzed? They freeze. they deflect, they shut down, and you feel even more disconnected than before. So instead of asking those heavy questions in heavy moments, try something lighter. Try creating a conversation around it rather than a confrontation. Instead of asking, "Where is this going?" with tension in your voice, try saying, "Hey, I really enjoy what we have. I'm curious what you think about it." There's a softness there, a curiosity rather than a demand. It opens a door instead of closing one. And an avoidant person is far more likely to walk through an open door than a door you're trying to force them through. Here's the second thing. Stop being endlessly available. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but hear me out. When you are always there, always ready, always willing to drop everything the moment they reach out, you actually create a dynamic where they stop valuing your presence. Not because they're a bad person, but because humans, all humans, tend to value what feels slightly out of reach more than what feels completely guaranteed. This is not about playing games. This is not about making them wait on purpose just to mess with their head. This is about having a real life. A life that exists whether they're in it or not. A life with friends, interests, goals, passions, things that genuinely light you up. Because when you have that, two things happen. First, they see someone worth pursuing. Someone who isn't sitting by the phone waiting. Someone who is out there living. That's attractive to anyone, but especially to an avoidant person who needs to know that you're not going to swallow them whole the moment they commit. Second, and this is the part people miss, you actually become happier. And happiness is contagious. You stop carrying the weight of this relationship as the only thing keeping you afloat. And that shift in you changes the entire energy between you two. Here's the third thing, and this one is so important. Learn the difference between pulling back and creating space. They are completely different things, and getting them confused will cost you. Pulling back is a reaction. Is what you do when you're hurt or frustrated and you want them to notice and chase you. It's emotional manipulation, even when it comes from a place of pain. Avoidant people can smell that. They can sense when someone is being cold as a strategy. And it doesn't make them come closer. It either triggers their own walls or it confirms their belief that relationships are complicated and painful. Creating space, on the other hand, is intentional. It's what you do when you recognize that your avoidant partner needs room to breathe, and you genuinely give them that room without resentment. You let them have a quiet evening without texting. You let them have time with their friends without needing to know every detail. You let conversations be short sometimes without reading into it. And you do all of that not because you're playing a game, but because you understand that space is what allows an avoidant person to actually miss you, to feel the warmth of your presence because they've also felt the absence of it. Space is what makes closeness feel safe to them because it shows them that closeness doesn't mean suffocation. Now, here's something I want to talk about that almost nobody discusses, and it might be the most important thing in this entire conversation. Your own anxiety in this relationship. Because here's the thing. In most cases, when one person in a relationship is avoidant, the other person has what's called an anxious attachment style. And anxious and avoidant partners attract each other like magnets. It's almost like they were designed to find each other, but not in a good way, in the sense that they perfectly trigger each other's deepest wounds. The anxious partner needs reassurance. They need closeness. They need to feel chosen consistently. And when they don't get that, they pursue more. They text more. They talk more. They try harder, which makes the avoidant partner pull back more, which makes the anxious partner pursue even harder, which makes the avoidant partner pull back even further. And it becomes this exhausting, painful cycle that neither person fully understands and both people feel trapped by. Breaking that cycle requires one thing. One person has to stop playing their part. And since you're the one here right now watching this, trying to figure out how to make this work, that person has to be you. Not because it's fair, but because you're the one who understands what's happening. You're the one with the awareness, and awareness is power. So how do you break the anxious pattern? You start by recognizing when it's happening. You notice the moment you feel that pull in your chest, that desperate need to reach out and get confirmation that they still care. You notice it. And instead of acting on it immediately, you pause. You ask yourself, what do I actually need right now? Is reaching out going to give me what I need? Or is it going to reinforce a pattern that's hurting both of us? And sometimes the answer is to reach out, but from a grounded place, not from a panicked place, from a place of genuine warmth and desire to connect, rather than a place of anxiety and need for reassurance. That difference, the difference in your internal state when you reach out, changes everything about how it lands on the other side. Let's talk about communication, because this is one of the biggest areas where things go wrong with an avoidant partner. And it goes wrong in very specific, very predictable ways. The first way it goes wrong is what I call the emotional flood. This is when you've been holding something in for a while, some hurt, some frustration, some need that hasn't been met, and it finally comes out all at once. All at once and all at volume. You've been bottling it up because you didn't want to seem needy or push them away. And then one day something small happens and suddenly everything comes out. The thing from last Tuesday, the thing from 3 weeks ago, the pattern you've noticed, the fear underneath it all. And to an avoidant person, this emotional flood feels like a tidal wave. They don't know how to navigate it. They feel overwhelmed. They feel attacked. And they do what they always do when they feel overwhelmed. They shut down. They go quiet. They leave the room or the conversation. And you're left feeling even more unheard than before. The solution here is to not let things build up to that point. Address things smaller, more often, more calmly before they turn into a flood, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if you're not sure how they'll react. Small, clear, calm conversations about how you feel are infinitely more effective than one massive emotional release. They're easier for an avoidant person to receive. They're easier to respond to. And they build a track record of communication that feels safe rather than threatening. The second way communication goes wrong is in the timing. Avoidant people need transition time. They need a moment to shift from whatever they were doing into a conversation about feelings or the relationship. They're not good at going from 0 to vulnerable in 30 seconds. So if you try to have a serious conversation the moment they walk through the door, or right before bed when they're already shutting down for the night, or in the middle of a stressful moment, you're going to get a version of them that can't really show up for it. And you're going to feel rejected when what actually happened is you just picked the wrong moment. Instead, give them a heads up. Not in a scary way, not in a way that makes them spend 3 days dreading the conversation. Just something simple. Hey, at some point this week, I'd love to chat about something on my mind. Nothing serious, just want to share something. That gives them time to prepare, time to shift into a mental space where they can actually be present. And you'll be amazed at how differently those conversations go when they've had even just a little time to get ready for it. The third communication mistake people make is asking for too much, too fast. Avoidant people open up slowly, achingly slowly sometimes. And the worst thing you can do is pressure them to go deeper or faster than they're ready to go. When they share something, resist the urge to immediately go deeper. Resist the urge to say, okay, but what do you really feel about it? Or to use their small disclosure as a springboard to demand more. Just receive it. Thank them for it, even if only internally, and let them come back to it when they're ready. Trust builds slowly, and every time you receive their small vulnerability without making them regret it, you're building that trust, one tiny brick at a time. Now let's talk about something really nuanced. The concept of leading with warmth rather than leading with need. This is one of the most powerful shifts you can make in how you show up with an avoidant person. Most people, when they feel disconnected from an avoidant partner, lead with their need. They say things like, I feel like you've been distant, or I need more from you, or I don't feel like you're as into this as I am. Now again, these feelings are completely valid. I'm not saying your needs aren't real. I'm saying there's a more effective way to express them. Because when you lead with need, the avoidant person immediately feels like they've failed, like they owe you something they're not capable of giving. And that feeling triggers withdrawal. But when you lead with warmth, when you say something like, I miss you when we don't connect as much, or I really love the way things feel between us when we're close like this, you're expressing the same underlying feeling, but in a completely different way. You're not pointing a finger. You're drawing them towards something good rather than away from something bad. And avoidant people respond so much better to that. They respond to being pulled toward a positive experience than being pushed away from a negative one. Think about it this way. If someone says, you never spend time with me, you feel accused. You feel like you need to defend yourself. But if someone says, I had so much fun with you last weekend, I'd love to do something like that again, you feel wanted. You feel seen for something good. And you're naturally inclined to give more of what got that response. Same underlying message, completely different delivery, completely different result. Let's get into something a bit deeper now. Identity and individuality within the relationship. Because for an avoidant person, this is everything. They have a core fear of losing themselves in a relationship, of becoming so merged with another person that they can't find where they end and the other person begins. And so one of the most powerful things you can do is actively encourage their individuality. Not as a strategy, not as a way to manipulate them into wanting you more, but as a genuine expression of the fact that you value them as a complete person, not just as a partner. This means celebrating when they spend time doing things they love without you. It means genuinely asking about their interests, their goals, their dreams, and actually listening rather than waiting for it to loop back to the relationship. It means not making them feel guilty for needing alone time. It means having your own strong sense of self so that you're not dependent on the relationship for your entire identity either. When an avoidant person sees that you genuinely support their independence, that you're not threatened by it, that you don't sulk or punish them for needing space, something shifts in them. That wall starts to have a door in it because the thing they were most afraid of, losing themselves, starts to feel less likely. And when that fear reduces, the need to keep their distance reduces too. They can actually start to come toward you, not because you've cornered them into it, but because it starts to feel safe. Here's something else that matters enormously: consistency over intensity. Most people, when they're trying to win back or keep the attention of an avoidant person, go for intensity, big romantic gestures, deep, heavy conversations, pouring their heart out in a long message at midnight. And yes, sometimes avoidant people respond to those things in the short term. But in the long term, what creates security, what makes an avoidant person genuinely start to feel safe with you is consistency. Showing up the same way, day after day, week after week, being reliable, being predictable in the best possible sense of the word. Not dramatic, not urgent, just consistently warm, consistently present, consistently yourself. Which means that even if you've shown patience, created space, stayed consistent, and stopped chasing, you may still find yourself in a relationship that isn't meeting your needs. And if that happens, you owe yourself an honest conversation. Not as a threat, not as an ultimatum, but as a genuine evaluation of whether this relationship is sustainable for you. Here's the paradox. The moment you're truly okay with walking away from a relationship that no longer serves you, you become far more attractive to an avoidant person. Not because you're playing games, but because you're showing something they deeply respect. self-worth, healthy boundaries, a life that doesn't disappear inside the relationship. That kind of person feels safe to love. Someone who stands beside them instead of clinging to them. Now let's look at what actually raises an avoidant person's walls and what lowers them. Their walls usually go up when they feel pressured or like they're losing control. Heavy commitment conversations before they're ready. Feeling responsible for regulating your emotions. Being pushed for more vulnerability right after they've already opened up. Moving faster than they can handle. What lowers those walls is almost always the opposite. Calm, curious conversations. Giving their vulnerability room to breathe instead of demanding more. Sharing your feelings without making them responsible for fixing them. Showing that you can handle disappointment without turning it into a crisis. Quiet, pressure-free moments together. A pace that feels safe rather than rushed. One of the most reassuring things you can say is something simple like, I'm not in any rush. I'm just enjoying getting to know you. That removes the pressure. It tells them they're free, not trapped. And for someone who's spent years fearing that closeness means losing themselves, those words can completely change how they experience the relationship. Let's talk about physical connection for a moment, because this is one of the most overlooked ways to build trust with an avoidant person. Many avoidants are far more comfortable with physical closeness than emotional conversations. A walk together, cooking side by side, watching a movie without pressure to talk, sitting together in comfortable silence. These moments create connection without making them feel emotionally cornered. What matters isn't the activity itself, it's the feeling attached to it. You're creating experiences where being close doesn't automatically lead to emotional pressure. Over time, they begin to associate you with comfort, safety, and peace. And that physical ease often becomes the bridge to emotional openness. Sometimes the deepest conversations don't begin with words. They begin with simply feeling safe enough to stay. Now, I need you to hear this because this is where most people get stuck. You cannot fix an avoidant person. You cannot heal their wounds for them. No amount of love can force someone to change. That decision has to come from them. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because love naturally makes us want to help. It makes us believe that if we're patient enough, understanding enough, or supportive enough, eventually everything will click. But healing isn't something you can do for another person. You can create a safe environment, but they still have to choose to walk through that door themselves. Which means that even if you've shown patience, created space, stayed consistent, and stopped chasing, you may still find yourself in a relationship that isn't meeting your needs. And if that happens, you owe yourself an honest conversation. Not as a threat, not as an ultimatum, but as a genuine evaluation of whether this relationship is sustainable for you. Ask yourself a simple question. If nothing changed from this point forward, would I still choose this relationship a year from now? That's not a pessimistic question, it's an honest one. Because hope is beautiful, but hope should never replace reality. Here's the paradox. The moment you're truly okay with walking away from a relationship that no longer serves you, you become far more attractive to an avoidant person. Not because you're playing games, but because you're showing something they deeply respect. Self-worth, healthy boundaries, a life that doesn't disappear inside the relationship. When someone knows that you'll stay only because you genuinely want to, not because you're afraid to leave, the entire dynamic changes. Your presence starts feeling like a choice instead of a demand. And choice always feels safer than obligation. That kind of person feels safe to love. Someone who stands beside them instead of clinging to them. Someone who has their own identity, their own purpose, and their own emotional stability. Now let's look at what actually raises an avoidant person's walls and what lowers them. Their walls usually go up when they feel pressured or like they're losing control. Heavy commitment conversations before they're ready. Feeling responsible for regulating your emotions. Being pushed for more vulnerability right after they've already opened up. Moving faster than they can handle. Even small things can unintentionally create that feeling. Constantly asking for reassurance. Expecting immediate replies. turning every moment of distance into a serious relationship discussion. To you, those behaviors might feel like love. To them, they often feel like pressure. What lowers those walls is almost always the opposite: calm, curious conversations, giving their vulnerability room to breathe instead of demanding more, sharing your feelings without making them responsible for fixing them, showing that you can handle disappointment without turning it into a crisis. Quiet, pressure-free moments together. A pace that feels safe rather than rushed. The goal isn't to make them open up faster. The goal is to become someone whose presence doesn't trigger the need to shut down. One of the most reassuring things you can say is something simple like, I'm not in any rush. I'm just enjoying getting to know you. That removes the pressure. It tells them they're free, not trapped. It tells them this connection doesn't come with hidden expectations or deadlines. And for someone who's spent years fearing that closeness means losing themselves, those words can completely change how they experience the relationship. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give an avoidant person isn't more effort. It's the feeling that they can breathe while they're with you.